Hello, hello, and welcome to Hot Take Think Tank. I'm Kier.
And I'm Liam. Today we'll be discussing giving cash to the homeless, tech billionaires trying to start a new city, and of course Kier's latest essay on the Kier Here Substack. But first, Kier's going to tell us about a brewing controversy in the climate science world.
Yes, thanks, Liam. Patrick T. Brown wrote an article for the Free Press called I Left Out the Full Truth to Get My Climate Change Paper Published. So, you can tell from the title, people have very strong feelings about this article.
Mm-hmm.
So, the basics are that Brown is a climate scientist who just published a paper on wildfire growth risk in California in Nature, which is one of the world's most respected journals. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to say, the paper I just published focuses exclusively on how climate change has affected extreme wildfire behavior. I knew not to try to quantify key aspects other than climate change in my research because it would dilute the story that prestigious journals like Nature and its rival Science want to tell. So he goes on to explain that getting published in high-profile journals is really crucial to a scientist's career, and that those journals have made it obvious through their editorial choices what kind of climate papers they will publish. He believes that warning the public about the dangers of climate change is prioritized over understanding the complexities of the issue, and that this distorts climate research and makes it harder to achieve practical solutions. So, getting into specifics, like he's talking about the ways that scientists might tailor their studies to increase chances of publication. So the first example he gives is sort of supporting mitigation efforts, like reducing emissions over adaptation, like building resilient infrastructure, ignoring or downplaying practical actions that can counter the impacts of climate change, and focusing on whatever metrics will give you the most dramatic numbers, not necessarily the ones that would be the most useful. And he kind of talks about how the underlying fear seems to be that a practical analysis that is solutions focused could weaken the case for lowering emissions. So
Totally. Yeah, it's the theory of it is that it's like there needs to be huge like policy changes to deal with climate change, and the only way that those changes are going to happen is if the public is like really riled up and consistently told how bad things will be without those policy changes, sort of like at the, to the exclusion of any, middling result, anything that's like, oh yeah, I mean, this could be kind of bad, maybe it'll be okay, even if that, even if it's true, and even if it's like just, one little corner of climate change and it doesn't change the whole narrative. It sounds like this author thinks the big journals are very hesitant to publish sort of any paper that could, be picked up by that sort of news cycle that might hurt the politics of the case, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. Which is really interesting because this article was picked up by certain right-wing outlets to be like, the climate scientists are lying to us.
Yeah, totally.
But he's very clear that his paper, it's not a hoax. He stands behind it. Nothing was fabricated or distorted. But he did design and present the study in a way that he felt would increase his chances of high-profile publication, and that the study could have been more useful if he didn't feel the need to have to do that. And he's actually left academia partially because of that pressure that he felt. And he's working now for the Breakthrough Institute, which is an interesting and somewhat controversial environmental research center that was founded in 2007 and is located in Berkeley. So the reason that they're controversial is because they're aligned with eco-modernist philosophy, which believes in embracing modernization, technological development, and increasing economic growth. Alongside solving environmental problems. So, as an example, they believe that some land should be used very intensively so that the maximum amount of wilderness can be left alone. So
Interesting.
it is very interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of like counter to the, I don't know, when I think of like a climate activist, they're all like, all about, as much nature as possible and being kind to Mother Earth, that sort of thing. And it sounds like this
Yes.
institute does not take that stance, sort of the pro-mining subset of the environmentalists.
Yeah, like, yes, I think rather than, wanting all the farmers of the world to adapt, more sustainable practices, like that might be less of a priority for this institute. And I think that's like more of the general consensus of, what should be done. So it's very interesting. But I mean, what he's saying also, like, in one sense, shouldn't be that controversial. Like, he points to a U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forestry Service report, and that report says that worsening wildfires on the West Coast are caused by a combination of accumulating fuels, a warming climate, expanding development in fire-prone landscapes, and even that like past land use practices, drought, and an overemphasis on fire suppression are all contributing factors.
Totally. I was struck even, he says, our current research indicates that these changes in forest management practices could completely negate the detrimental impacts of climate change on wildfires.
Isn't that incredible?
It is. Totally.
If that's true, that's big news, right?
Yeah, but it kind of got at what I found sort of strange about this article, which is like, it's making the case that there's like these perverse incentives sort of to do worse science in the name of like getting these big publications and big numbers of citations and that. But I don't know, it's weird. Like with that, he's saying that there is current research also on forest management that that they're going to make changes. Yeah, I don't know, it's like that sort of finding you think wouldn't occur if the problems were as bad as he's sort of laying them out to be, right? If the incentives totally stop anyone from doing this like adaptation style research, then we wouldn't be doing forest management practice changes.
We wouldn't know about it. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it did resonate with me when he was pointing out that, like, if you're reading the news, the cause you're going to hear for wildfires is climate change. And
totally,
I certainly think that that's been my experience. Like I haven't seen like forest management very widely discussed in the media.
Yeah.
So I still think it's possible that there are these journals that, have a certain paradigm, and that they're very strongly influencing like what kind of trickles down into the press and what people hear about.
Yeah, totally. I guess I wonder, I'm not sure if there's like a quote in here that, or if it's just me sort of extrapolating. But I sort of wonder how much of it's a problem with like academia and research broadly versus how much it is a problem with like media and like specific media focused journals. Like he does, he names Nature and Science, the two big competing journals for like the top of the field or whatever. But like, is it, how dire is the situation if there's also hundreds of other competing journals that will publish your research?
Yes.
That's sort of countervailing to what the mainstream wants. Like it's two big journals. It would be nice if they had better standards, I guess, but you don't want to overstate the problem.
Yeah, for sure. And Magdalena Skipper is the editor of Nature, who obviously responded to these allegations.
Oh, okay.
And part of the way that she defended the journal was by pointing to 3 articles that contradicted what Brown was saying about the article's narrow focus. So one of them was a piece on how the human design of cities affects the damage left by wildfires. So, yeah, and I think the tricky thing when someone is saying that there is an elephant in the room is that it's implicit, right? Like no one came to him and said, you can only write this way if you want to get published in this journal. it's like it was something that he did to himself, right?
Totally.
And it sounds like, he has gotten many private messages from other scientists who feel a similar pressure, but you also have a number of scientists that have come out and either said that they don't agree that such pressures exist, or that, Brown himself showed a serious lapse in judgment by, publishing this study and then, publishing an article about the issues with the study. But I also saw that some scientists definitely agree that there's a problem with having a handful of journals that hold so much power, or that concentrate so much power in what gets communicated to the press and public. And I think that that's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah, I think it's also, it's one of those cases where it's a maybe a trickier problem than than this article sort of gives the journals credit for. Like, what comes to my mind, do you know Andrew Wakefield and the Lancet thing?
Tell me, is this the autism study guy?
Yes. Yeah, that's that guy. In like the late 90s, he got a study about the MMR vaccine causing autism into the Lancet, which is like the premier medical sciences journal. And that's basically where the whole modern anti-vax movement came from.
Wow.
Was that study. And then he went, on the news shows and got started and wrote books, and other people joined the cause. But that, I feel like that's sort of the worry, right? Is that people still talk about that study, which has been redacted now by the paper and all that. And I think all of the other authors who, co-authored it with him. But you can see a big journal that is like lending its name to research. They have a reason to be cautious with a study that goes too strongly against the, you could call it the narrative, or you could call it like the scientific consensus, right?
Right.
It's I don't know. I think it is a tricky problem, and I wonder sort of how much it is the job of sort of smaller upstart kind of journals to try and publish those papers that will become the hugely cited papers in the future, right? And that's sort of how they can make a name for themselves alongside Nature and Science, right? If those two are too conservative and they don't publish anything that's not already, close enough to confirmed, then they'll miss out on things, right?
Absolutely. And I think this article points to like a larger question, right? Which is that like, well, okay, so for example, this article, it is very clear that Brown is not a climate change denialist. He's not even trying to minimize its effects. What he is saying is that mitigation and adaptation both deserve our attention, and that may not be what's happening right now. But regardless of how clear he's been, the right-wing media has run with it to feed into climate denialism. So it is sort of that question where it's like, if you put out something that is nuanced and true as you see it and points out an issue, if that gets used like as a blunt force instrument by bad actors, like, does that mean that this shouldn't have been put out at all? And I think like that's kind of my question for you, Liam. Do you think that this article will have like a net positive or a net negative effect on the world of climate science?
Interesting. I mean, I'm not sure. I sort of wonder sort of how small or unimportant a lot of this is. Not that it's not climate science as a whole, but sort of like the implied biases of the editors of a couple of journals. Particularly, I don't know, it's like this connection to the media and the story that gets out there, sort of, when I think that like most of the good research is probably happening not to be published, but to be like acted upon, right? Like government funded studies for, how can we handle wildfire season better next year? Those studies do also happen, and no one cares if they get picked up in the media, because it's like, directly, immediately actionable information for, governments and big institutions to make use of. So I don't know. I feel like there's just so much more to the world than like the media and what gets published in papers or talked about on the news. Yeah, so I don't know. I think this article is sort of written in a way to make you worry about things, and in the end, I didn't feel that worried after reading it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Yeah, I think part of what I'm hearing you say is like it's good to like keep this in perspective, right? That it's not like this huge reveal that's like, oh, there's a conspiracy against adaptation measures or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
I do personally, I love it when people like say the unspoken thing, right? Like
Sure.
if there are these norms that are influencing scientists that are not explicitly said but just sort of generally understood, I think that those are worth exploring.
Totally.
But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think the proof is sort of in the pudding, in the sense that like, are we going to see our governments implementing both adaptation and mitigation? Like, are we seeing more money going into like thinning the vegetation in the forests and doing prescribed burns and these sort of other measures that are really important to be doing alongside bringing down emissions? And in that sense, it kind of reminds me of the opiate epidemic, where, you have certain governments saying like, oh, we're going to build, more detox facilities, more rehabs. And it's like, that's great. But safe supply is like what is actually going to save people's lives immediately, right? Keep them alive long enough to make it into detox and rehab. So yeah, I think we need both, right? We need harm reduction, we need a safe supply, and we need to open rehab and detox facilities. And putting all our eggs in one basket isn't going to be the best solution ever, really.
No, but it's I don't know, the story about like one side versus the other side is just so often very compelling, even though the reality is almost always both sides a little bit.
Absolutely.
I can't finish this segment without just touching on like the irony of how perfectly tailored this article is to the Free Press, which is where it was published. Just like,
let's talk about it. Yes.
Just how like it feels like it was. I don't know. Like there was like some cherry picking going on. It felt like, and he knew the audience that would be interested in sort of eating this sort of essay up, and left out the more nuanced, complicated parts of that issue, while talking about how to get published somewhere else he had to leave out the nuance of the climate change stuff he was studying. I don't know. There's just, it's like, this guy really likes to massage clean narratives out of the facts he wants to write about.
That's true.
Whether it's for a science journal or for a political essay website or whatever it is.
Yes.
He knows how to write things that the editors like.
That's a very good point. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It does fit the Free Press beat very, very well. Totally. And and you have to wonder, like, again, like, where his own judgment comes into this, right? Because there probably are many academic scientists toiling away and staying true to the research that they feel will be the most useful.
Totally.
Patrick T. Brown is saying he's not one of those people. So, perhaps he's not a great fit for that world. But I'm glad at least to see some discussion about the incentives in that world and how they may be affecting things, even if it's not clear to what degree that is happening.
Yeah, totally. Next, we wanted to discuss an article from the Tyee written up by Jen St. Dennis entitled, "A Study Showed Giving Money to Homeless People Changed Lives. What's Next?" It was focused on a study from the University of British Columbia and a nonprofit called For Social Change, funded by the Canadian government, where they gave $7,500 to 50 homeless people here in Vancouver and studied how the next year of their lives went, and for a comparable group of homeless people who did not receive the cash. And the results appeared quite positive. People who received the transfer spent less time homeless, less time food insecure, and they found permanent housing faster. And Kier, I'm curious if these results are surprising to you at all, or do you think you would have guessed this result ahead of time?
That's a great question. Oh, I mean, it's tempting to like pat myself on the back and be like, well, of course I knew this. And
I mean, it's the sort of policy I feel like you're a big believer in, right?
yes,
generally.
I am. And I mean, I think that's the thing. Like it seems clear that, you know, poverty is a trap and a cycle for people, right? Because once you're sort of in that position where you've lost your housing, probably your family, your job, it's not so easy to enter back into the workforce, right? It's like, where
Totally.
do you shower? What clothes do you wear? How do you print your resume? How do they call you to tell you if you got the job, right? Like there are so many barriers, and, you know, someone who's getting, you know, $20 in a hat every day is like never going to be able to like save up or accumulate enough to like make a significant purchase in that direction, right? So it does feel like, if someone has nothing, they need like a generous chunk of something to get them going again. And I do think that there's a lot of belief around like how homeless people would spend a chunk of money, such as $7,500, that this, you know, there's the belief that they would spend it on like alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or things of that nature. And that was what I found was the most interesting about the study, was that there was no significant difference in how much money was going to drugs and alcohol and cigarettes between the group that had $7,500 and the group that didn't have that at all.
Totally. I also found that remarkable, and then I did see a sentence that made it feel a bit less remarkable, where they limited the people who were eligible to people who did not have severe levels of alcohol or drug use or severe psychiatric symptoms.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, that's really important to point out, right? It's like there is no like one size fits all solution for homelessness. And if you do, I think one of the other qualifiers was that they had to have become homeless within the last 2 years.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
That is a very specific population of homeless people, right?
Yeah, I sort of wish they'd broken it down, like what percent of homeless people does that represent? Because obviously there are some people on the streets who do not meet any of those criteria, and I would guess that those are the people who it's hardest to help, just generally, right? I don't know if direct cash would help, or, you know, shelters and that. I think that group of people is very hard to, I don't know, sort of rehabilitate, I guess. But
absolutely.
But I get the impression that I don't know. I think people think of homeless people sometimes like as a homogenous group that mostly falls into those categories, right? That they think of homelessness as something that sort of only afflicts alcoholics and drug addicts and that sort of thing. But I think there's a huge number of people, there's a lot of people who just, you know, lose their job and then can't afford rent and then have to live on the streets, you know, maybe just for a couple of weeks till they find a new place to live. But that's still a big problem.
Absolutely. And you can imagine how things could snowball from there, right? Like once you're on the streets, like if you get to a point of hopelessness where you're like, oh no, like I'm not getting out of this situation anytime soon, like you could see despair setting in, and that person might start making very different decisions about substances and, you know, lifestyle at that point.
I guess most people, you know, when you think of the you know, drug addicted homeless and that, I don't know. We'll go back to them during their first 2 years of homelessness. I wonder how different it looked, right? Did the drug addiction come before the homelessness and cause the homelessness, or did the homelessness lead to drug addiction because there's nothing else that felt good that they had available to them?
Absolutely. And there is a humongous correlation between disability and poverty and disability and homelessness, right? Whether that is mental health issues or physical health issues, like the numbers are really staggering. And even if you look at like the number of people on social assistance in BC, almost all of them are applying for disability.
Right.
Which I didn't know until recently that, you know, the welfare recipients, most of them are also disabled, and they're also in the process of applying for disability, right? So this population of, you know, the idea of these poor people that are like super irresponsible and like taking advantage of the system and living high on the hog or whatever, like it's once you start to like look at the kind of subpopulations, it's hard to imagine that that's a very large group of people at all.
Totally. Yeah, it's I think another interesting thing about this study was I mean, it's the sort of the direct cash transfers I think are in contrast to a system of like instead of providing money, you provide support, right? Like places to sleep and internet access and, you know, PO boxes or whatever it might be. You know, in this article, they ran some numbers, right? That it was sort of less financially draining to the system on the whole, just to give people money instead of to provide them services, right? That they spend like 100 less days homeless, and every day that they are homeless, they're probably in a shelter or, you know, using some community service that I guess in theory could be cut if we were just giving everyone money. But I don't know. It's an interesting, I feel like, blend of like lefty and righty stuff where it's this idea that's usually found like in the right side of politics, the right wing of politics, I should say, where it's like, I don't know, like personal responsibility and that the state shouldn't make decisions for you. People should be able to make their own decisions. And it's right. It's this idea that like it seems as though homeless people, given cash, can make better decisions for themselves than the government can, you know, choose for them and decide for them ahead of time for what services to offer. Which I just thought was interesting.
Well, and that's one of the hesitations I've heard from leftists about universal basic income in general is like, if we get universal basic income, but at the same time, all these services are cut, people could end up in worse positions, like particularly severely disabled people that are receiving like very specific supports through the government, right? That, you know, might currently be subsidized. There's also the fear that, you know, as soon as universal basic income was implemented, oh, look, all the landlords raise the rents and, you know, the money is siphoned from people immediately. So I definitely think that, like, I do support universal basic income, but I think the devil is in the details, and that, like, if there's not, like, really smart policy regarding it, that you could end up with, you know, something that nobody wants. I mean, I do think part of why we have so many homeless people with mental health issues on the streets is because we closed all the institutions, right? And while the institutions had many problems, they did provide a place to sleep and regular meals and social interaction for severely mentally ill people, some of whom are sleeping on concrete now. So it is a really interesting study, and you do have to wonder like how it will be implicated, I suppose, to prop up different ideas, one of which could be, oh, look, all these services like are bloated. We've got a gravy train going on here, and, we should really slim that down.
I don't know. It's, I mean, I think it's sort of a silly comparison, the one where they're like, oh, well, we could, if we didn't have to offer the shelters and that, we could save money through this program. I do think it's like a false choice, right? It's like, maybe you could offer both. And then, like, if the shelters end up being used less, you could have fewer of them, but you don't have to, like, do it at the same time necessarily. But I don't know. I did think it was interesting because I do feel like people often think of homeless people as like lacking competency in one way or another, right? But the idea that like if you just give them money, they can figure it out, speaks in opposition to that idea, right? That it's like it's not actually like a skill deficit or a lack of competency. It's like actually just a lack of material wealth. Right?
We're going to come back to this later, actually, when we discuss my essay. But yes, the idea that, like, what poor people are lacking is not money, right?
Right.
It's like morals or like an upstanding character. That is the true cause of poverty.
Yeah. Silliness.
We've been stuck with it for a long time, so it is. I feel hopeful when I see a study like this, for sure.
Yeah, totally. I ran a couple numbers. Okay, they had a number of like Canadians that are homeless, like throughout an entire year, spent at least one night sleeping outside, and to give every single one of those people $7,500. How much would that cost if we spread it out among all 40 million Canadians?
Oh my gosh!
Right, because that's like that's the increased tax burden, or whatever. Right, it wouldn't be equally distributed, but it comes to $44.
Wait! Let me get this straight. If every tax-paying Canadian spent $44, then every person who has experienced homelessness in the last year could receive $7,500?
Yeah. That's the math.
We should do that. Can we do that?
We'll start a drive, get everyone to sign up for $44. Yeah. It's not that big a bill, is it? I mean, it's because there's so many more people who don't spend any nights homeless than there are people who do. $44 they add up quick.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. I'm glad you ran that number.
I was curious. I didn't have a good sense of where it would land before I ran it. I was like, I don't know, $7,500 each. That seems kind of steep.
Yeah, totally.
I suppose it would be hard to set up a system that, correctly gave out the money to just those people and not anyone else, because I don't know. I think I might sleep on concrete for a night if I got $7,500 out of it. But
it's true.
That's
perverse incentives. We've got a theme going. Yeah, no, there's so many amazing stories of that, right? Like, I think when Britain was ruling India, they were trying to cut down on the cobra population, and so they started paying for like dead cobras, and a bunch of people started breeding cobras to kill and bring to British officers.
and then they were like, oh no, this program is backfiring, so they canceled it and all the farmers just let the cobras free.
And then you have a bigger cobra problem. That's a very funny story. But really, like, the devil is in the details when it comes to policy. I feel that really strongly. Like, they have to be looked at very, very closely to look at, like, what the actual downstream effects will be.
No, it's like I was being sort of glib saying that I'd sleep on the concrete for $7,500, but I mean, I would actually consider it. I think, like, that's a substantial chunk of money, right? And it would be hard to filter out, if you make the test too rigorous for, like, passing the homelessness barrier, then people who do need help don't get it. But if you make it too lenient, the people who don't need help do.
Yeah, the eternal struggle of means testing, right? Who deserves it and who doesn't? Which is why I love universal basic income, but we'll get into that more another day, I'm sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah, so to wrap up this article, it sounds like the kind of policy you'd generally be in favor of. I'm curious what you hope happens next.
Well, I saw in the news article that they're going to do it on a larger scale, which will sort of give the study more weight in
Yep.
the world. So I think that's great. I do find myself like a bit skeptical or disappointed by how many steps there are between a hopeful finding in a study and like actually implementing that. And, you know,
Yeah.
I worry that our government might like commission a study that takes however many years and then not do anything with the results of
Sure.
that
Yeah.
study. So yeah, I mean, I hope that this like helps to change the conversation around homelessness and solutions to poverty, and that I don't know, that sort of like public pressure for practical solutions grows, and to the point where we can embarrass our politicians into caring about this.
Yeah, totally. I guess the more evidence you got in that fight, the better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so next up, we've got an opinion piece written by Molly Turner and published in the New York Times. It's about a group of tech billionaires who covertly purchased 50,000 acres of land north of San Francisco and have now announced their plan to build a new city from scratch. The essay focuses on how a lot of the problems that cities face are not technological in nature, and that there's a long history of rich people trying and failing to start new cities. And she brings up the idea that maybe this money would be better spent elsewhere. What do you think, Kier? Is this whole endeavor a bad idea?
Well, I've been listening to some episodes of the Truanon podcast that are on the charter cities concept, right?
Okay.
Which is very related to this project that you're talking about. But I don't know, there's like this libertarian fever dream, right, of being able to like have zero responsibility to the world outside of you and your friends, and that, you know, if you get together and there's nothing to interfere with it, that you will be able to create something that is
Totally.
greater than, you know, what we've come up with so far. And I was just talking about my frustration with bureaucracy and how
Yeah.
slow it can be. So, you know, I can understand some of the frustrations, but at the end of the day, I mean, so far these projects have been hilarious failures.
Yeah.
So that's what I think
Yeah.
is going to happen here.
Although I'm kind of curious. It's like there are lots of stories. Like, I think, isn't it Epcot, the part of Disney World, was supposed to be like a new town designed by Walt Disney that would be the perfect place or whatever.
Yes, it was.
There's obviously been those like attempts to like start from scratch and build some like wild new vision, but I'm not totally sure that that's what's going on in this case. I don't
That's
know. Like
interesting.
I read their official pitch for it, and their goals seem like pretty standard goals that a city would have. Create good paying local jobs and paths to get those jobs, walkable neighborhoods and paths to home ownership, help solve regional infrastructure needs. I don't know. It didn't seem like a pitch for like a wildly different kind of city. It sort of,
Well, then why aren't they going to a city that already exists to do it?
I actually do have a theory about that.
Please tell me.
My theory is that San Francisco is like a uniquely poorly run city. That all of these tech billionaires generally have to live in or near, and they just feel like we could just, you know, move 100 miles north and build a new San Francisco that would work better than this one. I think that might actually just be it.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact stories, but there's this famous, like, I believe it's a bus lane that's currently either street parking or like an everyone lane that was approved like 10 years ago and still hasn't been implemented
Oh,
by the city of San
no.
Francisco. They're sort of they've got like a famously slow approval process. I can't remember. It's like to open a cafe is like a 3-year process. It's just that kind of, it's a city that's built up a tremendous amount of red tape. And so I wonder if that's really it. Is there like, it would be, sure, we could move all of Silicon Valley to like Austin, Texas or something, but it still would be nice to be close to San Francisco for the people who stay there. And maybe
Yeah.
we just build something better next door.
That's true. I mean, so the Truanon episode specifically that I loved, I think, was called Squat Chilean Businessmen. And it's about this charter city project in Chile called Gulch, after the city in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, which is
Oh my
kind
gosh.
of a libertarian Bible of sorts. And oh my gosh, listening to that episode lays out exactly what happens when you don't have all of the safeguards and like trust mechanisms that are built into working on a project in, you know, a functioning city. And when you're relying on...
I'd say particularly, I'd be worried about it in a faraway country without a strong federal or state government, right? Like this new city is planned to still be in California, right? So they do still have to adhere to building codes and like federal legislation. You know, if you want to build something so wild that you can't do it in the United States or Canada or whatever, I would get sort of worried at that point, I think.
I mean, at that point, like, you're kind of reinventing colonialism, and I don't know if they realize that, right? But the idea of like going to an impoverished country, taking a chunk of it from the government, not paying any taxes or having any responsibility towards that local government, doing whatever you want and having full control over the labor conditions and the payments of workers within that. Like, we have done that before. So this project it's interesting because it's not as extreme as like fully, you know, leaving the country.
Starting a new, they're not trying to found a new country, I don't think, with all new laws.
Exactly. But you still have to wonder, like, how do the locals feel about this project?
Totally. Yeah. And I do think they did have a quote from like one of the representatives from the county who does point out, like, it's weird that they did this in secret and then sprung it on us, right? Because they acquired 50,000 acres, like, as a shell corporation that no one knew who was in charge of it. And then all of a sudden they're like, guess what? We're building a new city here. And it's like mostly just like fields at this point. But they don't want it to be fields anymore. They want it to be skyscrapers, I figure.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't seem like the right foot to start out on with the people that already live there. I know, I think it was the Alphabet Corporation that actually was going to have a large like waterfront project in Toronto that ended up falling through, and I think there were various like reasons for that. Some of them economic. It fell apart like around the pandemic times and such. But there was a lot of local resistance all the way through.
Totally.
So I think, like, if you do want to do something drastically different with a bunch of land that, you know, if there are people that are already there, which there almost always are, that's a variable that you don't want to leave for last.
No. Yeah, totally. It's I think it's an interesting project. I don't know. Part of me is just like, it's cool to see like competition in the realm of cities. Like, why not just give it a go? If you can build a better city, that would be cool. Like, I mean,
I would love to see like what they come up with for sure, because I do think, you know, if you hate red tape so much that just anyone can do whatever they like, I mean, that would make for an amazing documentary, if nothing else.
Oh, totally. And it's like, it might be a disaster, in which case they'll have a real hard time getting anyone to move there or stay there or pay property taxes there. And then it's just they wasted a bunch of their own money. Or it'll be a rousing success, and maybe other cities will like reconsider and try and like take lessons from it or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
The article did strike a tone at the end, like, why don't the billionaires instead, like, help pay for San Francisco's public transportation, which would be weird of them. I don't know.
I mean, they're not going to.
Yeah, it's like I'm all in favor of like taxing wealth and income, especially for the tremendously rich, like these people obviously are. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't bother me that much that they are choosing to take on some wild, expensive project with their money to try and build a weird new thing.
I know. I mean, like, no one really does like volunteer to pay to fund public transit. That's why we have the tax system, right? So
Yeah, totally.
yeah, it's not unusual that they're not doing that.
Well,
automatically.
and there's the upside, that they bought all of this land very cheap, and if they can successfully make a new San Francisco on it, they can sell the land for very expensive. Right? It's like that's what motivates a lot of people, maybe especially very rich people, is return on investment. They spent a lot of money buying all of this land, and now they're going to try to make it worth more than it was worth before. And it might be a tremendous failure, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see. It's funny. One other funny parallel that came to my mind, though, was Vancouver, which was a very small city until we had the World Expo in 1986, after which a couple of billionaires bought most of the industrial land. And it has
Really?
yeah, for real. My neighborhood, Yaletown, was like factories and like a train station, and now it's like all skyscrapers, and that land was pretty much all purchased by one billionaire after he saw it in Expo and was like, that would be better as a city than as industry. And then it has since happened. Yeah, so it's I don't know, not that wild for a billionaire to see potential in an area and buy it up and hope to develop it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think like with the housing crisis up here, we're certainly seeing a lot of tension between land that is either used for agriculture or land that is preserved in a greener, wilder state, and housing, right? Like
totally. And San Francisco's in the same boat for that. Just not nearly enough housing, ridiculous prices for everything.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in Ontario, there's a huge controversy around the green belt and land being taken out of that and given to developers or sold to developers. Here in Pitt Meadows, there's huge talk of land being removed from the agricultural land reserve to build housing on top of it. So I think this is a story that we're going to see repeated over and over again. But this particular strange group of extremely wealthy people probably have a more bizarre, unique, risky, and ambitious idea of what to do with the land.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious. I would totally, I don't know. I don't know how long it takes to build a city. It's got to be like 20 years or something, but I'd go visit in 20 years.
I think it depends if you're China or not, because they're very quick at building cities.
Although even these billionaires, their wealth pales in comparison to the state of China. I don't think even people this rich could put up. I don't know how many skyscrapers they could each afford. More than me or you, but not a whole city's worth, I don't think.
No, probably not.
Oh, well, so to wrap up, I've just got one question. If a city like this popped up near here, would you consider moving to it?
Oh, my goodness. No, but I would go visit.
Okay, yeah. You would be an early adopter for a weird new techno-billionaire city.
No,
I mean,
I
how
just
cheap would it have to be?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, once you bring price into it, it's like, yeah, if there's a deal to be had. But I would honestly just be concerned about their ability to deliver basic services like healthcare and education, because I think there's like a lot of like naivete around, oh, well, that's can't be that hard. I could do a better job. And
but
I
once you
really
get into
don't
the
think they
details,
could.
yeah, there's a lot of details.
Like, is my garbage going to get picked up? Like, I don't know. I would have a lot of questions.
Give it a year or two at least before moving in.
Yes, exactly. Let other people be the guinea pigs. Yeah. All right. Our next segment is about the essay that I published last week, which was called "What Happens When Activist Goals Become Mainstream Norms." And it sort of was me reflecting on my time as an activist and how when I was younger, a lot of my activism sort of targeted other leftists and was trying to get everybody on the same page. And we cared a lot about representation. We cared a lot about language. We didn't care very much about like material resources and sort of the conditions of working people's lives and that sort of thing. And also over time, I've seen some pretty strange things happen. Like, for example, anti-union agents are starting to rebrand themselves as diversity consultants. And I'm watching the language that meant so much to me be used against workers. So yeah, that's a little taste of the essay. You should go read it if that intrigues you.
Yeah, it should have. I mean, you should already be subscribed to the newsletter, so you should have read it last Friday. Well worth your time.
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, all the info will be in the show notes if you want to check that out. But yeah, it was really interesting to put it out there and see. Well, first of all, I was really curious to see how many people had heard of the phenomenon of anti-union agents rebranding as diversity consultants, right? And these diversity consultants going into workplaces specifically to gather private information on employees to provide to the employer. And I first learned about this through an article written by Li Feng, which was published by The Intercept. And the title is called "The Evolution of Union Busting," and there'll be a link for that as well. And so I polled my Instagram followers about it, and 75% of people who answered hadn't heard that this phenomenon was happening in workplaces. So that's kind of concerning.
Yeah, totally. That's a wild story. I'm curious about how commonplace is it? Like, is there still? I guess I don't really know much about the history of like how union busters have worked historically. I assume they don't. Yeah. They've never shown up and been clear about their purpose. Have they?
Well,
I guess like there's been riots and that sort of thing.
No, that's a great question. I mean, that's what's interesting about Li Feng's article is that he went to the conference where they talked about this.
Oh, wow.
And it's true that like it wasn't like a union busting conference, right? Like both the companies involved and the people who work for them, like they call themselves like the person expert or the health and wellness guy or whatever. Like there's a lot of coded language that kind of disguises these people as anti-union agents for sure. But yeah, there have been like various tactics over the years to bust unions. Obviously, if you go back far enough, you've got cracking people's heads open, assassinating people, and that is still happening in parts of the world, especially South America. Union drives down there, particularly in like resource extraction industries like mining, are very dangerous. Journalists and union organizers do get killed down there, and I'm sure in other places. But up here in Canada and in the US, it's more subtle than that these days. But there was a comment under a post I made about this essay from a former union organizer who was saying that like it's very common for an employer to give employees like one of the things that they want to crush the union, right? So even if they give the raise that those people wanted, it's still beneficial to them if there's no union, right? Because they might never have to give them a raise again. Like they're never going to, face like organized resistance.
Right. It's like not no permanent change to the power dynamic, just a one-time,
Yes, exactly.
Gift,
one-time gift. Yes. So that, like they might be like, okay, like you don't even need a union. We'll give you this thing you're asking for, because like you said, that does benefit the employer. So in recent years, we've seen more demands kind of around diversity coming from workers and coming from unions. And so, it feels like the anti-union agents are sort of evolving along with the sorts of complaints and demands that people have in their workplaces.
Right. So it's like a different fig leaf that can be offered in exchange for not unionizing. We will have a more diverse and inclusive workplace.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and
interesting.
Liam, I don't know if you would have heard this in your world or your line of work, but like the idea that unions are like this white guy thing, right? That like they're full of like, like that is a really poisonous idea to the working class, and is also like there's a lot of evidence that that's not true. Like when I organized with a union, most of the people I worked with were people of color, and most were actually women of color as well. But that's an example of, how you can start sowing discord in a union drive to try and like drive a wedge between people so that they'll turn on each other and the boss gets away scot-free.
Interesting. I have, I don't know. I'm having a bit of like just a reaction, because I'm not a big like conspiracy theory guy. I usually feel like people who, are framed as like doing evil things a lot of the time. There's like some incentive or motivation that's like not clear. And if you like understand it better, then it becomes like, sort of everyone justifies themselves to themselves somehow. And so it's, I don't know. I'm curious sort of what you think. Like to what degree are the people who are doing this union busting via these diversity things, like, do they think that they are actually like doing something honorable or good for society, right? Like how much do you think they are, like, is it just done entirely cynically? Like, let's, divide and conquer these people by racial and gender lines to destroy them? Or is it like, let's, actually, let's help these people out. This stuff matters, and we care about it, and we want to treat people right. Is there any of that? What do you think?
That's a really great question. I mean, I think that's like part of what's complex about this, right? Because I think that you have diversity consultants that are, really believe in what they're doing and have like good intentions going into a workplace. I think it's possible that bosses are still using those people's work to bust unions.
Right.
But then, you also have people who literally, like, their expertise is in preventing unions in the workplace, who are calling themselves diversity consultants. And those are not the same group. And then I'm sure there's like shades in the middle, right? There's like very like self-interested diversity consultants probably who are like, I will work for whoever pays me. So yeah, I think you have certain people that feel that, you know, unions take away the hard-earned money from, you know, these business owners and make their lives more difficult and, you know, interfere with the way that they want to run their businesses. There are people who truly think that unions are a bad thing for the world. But I think my concern sort of lies in these people that perhaps like don't have any particular loyalty, right? Like there's a diversity consultant who is quoted in Li Fang's article who didn't appear to be like a full-on anti-union agent. But she kind of said something along the lines of, well, like, you know, if we can go in there and solve the problems and then they don't need a union anymore, like, isn't that a good thing, right? And that is the sort of perspective that I think is still like, if you look at what the outcome is, it is detrimental to workers. You know, because wages are higher when you have a union in the workplace. Like, you have the ability to negotiate, right, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, that diversity consultant, whether she knows it or not, like, she is in line with the employers and saying, let's find a different solution, right? We don't need a union. We can do it some other way. So I think, like, any diversity consultant that plays that role in the workplace, you know, has the potential to undermine a union, whether or not they are like there with the intention of it or not.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's in the essay you talk about sort of, you know, the sort of things you were, you know, a big activist for before, and how many of them sort of became mainstream, right? But mostly I get the impression the things that have gone mainstream are not things that have much to do with like material wealth of people. And I guess that was sort of what you were focused on back in your hardcore activist days. So I guess I wonder, it's like, is there something about these causes that's like, that's an inherent part of, like, that it's like a very functional distraction from material wealth progress, that you had sort of stumbled into, you know, not because you were opposed to poor people getting money, but just because these causes definitely have their appeals. And then it's like, if you can get everyone focused on these issues that don't affect people's material situations, then people trying to withhold material can benefit from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it was Adolph Reed who talks about how identitarianism, right, like the social justice politics that we see these days, are a class politics, but they are the class politics of the professional managerial class. And so I think what I take away from that is that, you know, when you're talking about people who have graduate degrees or higher and are, you know, sort of in the intellectual elite and, you know, more likely to also be in the economic elite as a result of that, when you have those people shaping politics, language is really important. Identity and representation are really important, right? And so I think that, like, basically things have ended up really skewed when, you know, the movement leaders, the thinkers that are sort of at the forefront of things, don't have any money problems.
Right.
And
Totally.
they maybe never have. Maybe they did, but it's been so long they've forgotten. But yeah, I mean, I think, like, because that's where a lot of this identitarianism came out of, is like the universities and, you know, certain programs within the universities. So I think that like partially explains like the fact that like class is not one of the intersections that anyone seems to care about within social justice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like that could almost be seen as like a positive thing, not maybe on the whole, but the idea that like there are people sort of at every rung of society who are trying to make the world better. Right, that even when they're rich and everyone they know is rich, they still want to treat each other in a better way. It's still good, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very generous take, which I do like. I think, yes, that is good. But I don't know. I think maybe I'm a bit more cynical about, like, having representatives that are really disconnected from the group that they claim to represent, right? Like,
Totally. Yeah, I think it's different. Like the professional managers from like the members of parliament or whatever should probably maintain focus on their whole constituency or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Like Freddie DeBoer has written about like the gentrification of disability, right? And that you have like autistic people who are very high achievers, again, like have PhDs, that sort of thing, who are kind of speaking on behalf of nonverbal autistic people, with the assumption that like they have the same like needs and desires and requires for support and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think like that's something to be cautious about, is when you have people presenting themselves as spokespeople for a certain community, and whether they really have like the authority to be speaking on behalf of those people at all.
Yeah, totally. Well, one thing I'm curious about then is, I mean, I've known you throughout all these various ideas you've cared about or cared less about, and I feel like the time you cared most about all of these identitarian things is also maybe the time you were poorest or close to it. What do you think of that? Like, because I mean, there are times when you would have qualified for that $7,500, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you were very much in that scene at that time.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I've never been homeless, so I don't think I would have qualified for the $7,500. But yeah, no, I've had very little money for chunks of time, for sure. And yeah, it's weird because, you know, I talk about the identitarianism being really rooted in, you know, academia and stuff. I have not been to university. So obviously, yeah, not everyone who kind of picks up that torch is, you know, so through education, or, you know, not everyone who gets into it is wealthy, for sure.
Yeah, it somehow breaks through to people who you'd think it would be like painfully obvious how important material well-being is.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason that I was so deep in it at that time is because I was so miserable and so hopeless. And social justice has reasons for that, right? That like verge on like the conspiratorial in some ways, I would say now.
Totally.
Like the idea that like the world hates disabled people. They want disabled people to suffer. They want disabled people to die. They don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, so that felt true to me when I was at my sickest, which is also when I was at my poorest.
Yeah, it somehow, it reminds me of what we were talking about in the last episode, the idea of like being sick and finding comfort in the notion that you can't get better. Right, it's like there's sort of two ways to approach a tough situation, right? Either seeing it as a situation that can be ameliorated, or seeing it as something that you sort of have to live with. And I guess everything falls somewhere on that spectrum, right? It's not actually either or, but yeah, that's just what it reminds me of, right? The idea that if you're poor, and you know, could definitely find some comfort in the idea that poverty comes from systems of inequality that are far beyond your grasp, right?
Totally. Well, and I think like back then when I was first sick, when I was first broke and trying to make sense of it, like the idea that there was like that people were conspiring against me like felt right somehow, you know? And the truth is like way more banal, way more complicated, right? Way more boring, right? It's like
Totally.
it's
And
not
like not a clean narrative of like good and bad, right? It's kind of just some things that
exactly.
happen.
Yeah, it's like, well, like doctors try their best. They don't always know what's going on. You know, research takes a long time. And then after the research happens, you know, getting that implemented into a public healthcare system takes time. And that's why you don't feel so good, is like not as satisfying as being like, oh, like
Totally.
everyone's out to get me and no one cares, you know? So I think like that it was more the vibe of an identitarianism that like I really clung to at that time. And I think like now I'm in a much better position to like understand like what actually helps poor disabled people than I was when I was just sort of railing against the evils of the world.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's an interesting piece. Near the end of it, you sort of, I don't know, you have a nice list of like the big dreams of the left. And I think they're all a lot more material than the dreams you had in the past. Yeah, and the idea, there's so much we can accomplish if we end the internal purges and the purity tests. It's a very nice sort of, I don't know, almost a rallying cry at the end of the essay.
Thank you. I just always write manifestos by accident. It's just like this tendency that I'm working on.
I like it. It's like at the end, it's like, you know, the big applause lines as if you're like giving a speech at a pedestal or something. Very nice. The one thing that it made me curious about, you know, ending the internal purges and purity tests, after listing this, you know, is radical a good word for it? Maybe not extreme, but it's quite the list, right? Raising minimum wage to living wage, breaking up grocery monopolies, massive amounts of social housing. I'm curious what you think of sort of not the identitarian internal purges, but sort of the purity test of like, what about people who only like one of those policy ideas and not the rest of them?
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like people aren't going to all support all the same things. Like if we were like that, we wouldn't have the problems that we have, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that we've been in a situation like the left has been on the back foot for so long that we don't have like mass organizations that, you know, have chapters across the country that,
Right.
you know, allow people to vote and participate in shaping, you know, what a organization should work on, right? Like, you know, down in the United States, there's the Democratic Socialists of America, and there's no equivalent up here at this time. So, you know, I think that that's like something that would get worked out if we can like find a basis of unity to agree on,
Right.
you know, like what are like the values and principles that we do have in common. And then from there, it's like, yeah, we can't do everything, right? We're going to have to prioritize and decide, you know, what is most important, but also what is most strategic and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think, you know, I definitely am not proposing that everyone just agree with me and we do those things. Although, I mean, if that's what people want, we could. But more so that, like, we have to be able to tolerate and respect differences in opinions so that we can, like, find things to agree on and work on together.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. It's sort of like put in, I don't know, maybe it's trite, but like putting differences aside to find common ground, right? It's like if
Exactly.
if you don't agree on one part of it, that's cool. Well, do you agree on any of it? Right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
is there anything that enough people agree on to build a big movement out of? Doesn't have to be everything, right? Just any one of these policies would be a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, you don't want to nationalize the food banks? Well, don't come to Tuesday's meeting, you know? Like,
Right, yeah.
I think,
Totally.
yeah, there's just like tensions can be so high in these groups, even if they even exist in the first place, that there's not enough room for that respectful disagreement.
Totally. Yeah, that's another good essay. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Thank you.
Well, should we move on to my quiz? Wrap things up?
Yes, what are you quizzing me on today?
Well, we talked about that study where people were given $7,500. And that's about, if you stretch it out over a year, that's about $20 a day. So my question for you is, how many Canadians live on less than $20 a day as a percentage and as of 2017, because that's the year that the data is from?
Okay. Less than $20 a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be really small, I think. I'm going to go with 3%.
The answer is 6%.
6%?
6%.
Oh,
it was higher than I
wow.
thought. Yeah. 6%, because that seems like very little money to live on around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would guess it's, I don't know. I'm not sure how many Canadians live on reserve. I wonder how much of how much overlap there is there, or just generally, I feel like you'd have to live pretty rural to live on that little money. But yeah, 6%. And I do have the contextual numbers. Adjusted for inflation, in the year 2000, the number was 12%. And in 1975, it was 18%. So
okay, so we're
nice
still
downward trend.
Yeah, trending
Yeah.
in the right direction.
Yes, totally. And I did look up the numbers for the United States as well, just because I imagine, I don't know if most people listening are from Canada, probably not. Yeah, the United States rate currently is 7%, down from 10% in 2000 and down from 14% in 1974. So another line going in the right direction, but that's still surprisingly high, I'd say.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of people.
It's a funny number, I think, because it's like it's both too high and going down. So I don't know if it's good news or bad news.
Right. Yeah, it's like for that 6%, like that 6% is having a really hard time.
Totally.
But it's also only 6%, and it's also less than it used to be. So it's
it's down to a third of what it was in 1975. So
yeah, absolutely.
Down to a third in 50 years. Yeah.
Well, and I think about that too when it's like, when it feels like, yeah, we don't see the type of policy that would get rid of poverty, you know, or get close to getting rid of poverty. It's like, it is it's a small minority of people, right? Like, and it's a group of people that like do not have that much political power. So that's like why it matters that people who are not poor care about poverty, or people that are not homeless care about homelessness, because, you know, it's a small group that's like under so much strain and pressure. But you know, it's again, identitarianism being like, well, you know, homeless people should organize and like be in charge of the fight against homelessness. It's like homeless people should absolutely be at the table, but they're not going to be able to do it alone, right? We all need to pitch in for that.
Yes. Yeah. Pitch in our $44 a piece to help homelessness.
Exactly. Well said. Well, this has been Hot Take Think Tank. Until next time.